Welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Listen in as we discuss all things business, growth and marketing with business owners, thought leaders and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, founder of Roundhouse, the creative agency, Saul Edmonds.
Hi everyone and welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Today I'm speaking with Avi Sequeira from BNI around the topic, why give is gain in business networking. Avi, how are you today?
Well, thank you so much, Saul, for having me here. I'm in bright, sunny Adelaide and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, likewise. And is it nice and warm down there today, is it?
Yep. Nice, warm, sunny day predicted for some time before it turns windy. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, it's a bit the same up here. It's summer. Well, it's spring officially, but summer seems to have started to arrive in Queensland too. So okay, so before I get into the main part of the conversation, for everyone who doesn't know you and me too, of course, but they don't know you, would you be able to give everyone a bit of an overview of BNI Australia, yourself, a little bit of history and what BNI is for people who don't actually know what it is?
Sure. Thanks for having me once again, Saul. My BNI journey started in 2011. Someone I knew very closely, she was my mentor, invited me to a chapter meeting. I just thought, hey, these are a group of people who really identify with some of my core values, which is give us gain. And I'm like, to find a chapter which is like 35 people helping other members was really awesome. So I actually, put my money down right there. Coincidentally, I also was asked if I would like to meet the founder of BNI, Dr. Ivan Meisner.
Is that right?
And I said, of course, absolutely. And
wow.
So I landed up paying money for my BNI membership and also for the international conference, which was happening in Mumbai in Feb 2011. So I got inducted on a Friday, and I actually was shaking hands with Dr. Ivan Meisner on the next day, which was a Saturday.
Fantastic.
And that's been my BNI journey and story so far. 2017, 18 was when we decided to come to Australia and to Adelaide. And a week before I could actually move to Australia, I was managing an event in BNI Mumbai, which was the Mumbai Members Day, and the India National Conference, which is for executive directors and directors from all across India. And I actually met Frederick Marcoux, who was the national director of BNI in Australia. And as they say, the rest is just,
the rest is history.
The rest is history. We started talking, and I actually landed in Adelaide on the 26th of August 2018, and 27th of August 2018 I was in Brisbane, and we started talking, and in a couple of weeks, he said, I think I have something for you to be a part of BNI Australia team, and so now I'm the BNI Australia National Operations Support Director. My role, of course, is to help and support different regions to make sure the operations and things they need get done. Because one of the Brisbane regions, Brisbane North, is a national office region. I help the region as a director, and because I live in Adelaide, I'm also area director for a couple of chapters in CBD and South Adelaide.
Yeah, of course. So so your journey started in 2011, is that right?
Correct. That's
yeah. So wow. That was a fantastic introduction then to BNI. Was that because then also meeting Dr. Ivan Meisner? That was, am I correct in saying that was because then the international conference was there at the time? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
My induction actually coincided with the event, and I said, this is the best chance for me to meet the founder, not knowing that I would have many more opportunities to meet him in the future, because as a part of the national office team, we also visit the international conventions, the BNI international conventions. So 2018 was in Thailand, 2019 was in Poland, and I've happened now, between the time I got inducted to now, I've already met him 4 times.
Well, that's amazing. It's one of the things, as somebody who's never met him, but I mean, I don't know what other people would think, but I've always found when you listen to like the copious amount of content that is online, where he's on the podcasts, I guess especially, is that I always feel it's probably just his manner. Like he seems to embody in such a fantastic way the idea of Givers Gain from what, I mean, we're talking about like within this sort of podcast, like, and I mean, one of the key tenets of BNI, but I always feel, which I think is like an amazing sign that somebody is doing something incredibly right when you feel like you know them and you never even really met them.
But
you know, and he's always so, I know this isn't necessarily specifically relevant to what we're talking about, but he's always so relaxed and so sort of, I don't know, forthcoming, just really, it's not something you can put your finger on. You can go, oh, that equals this. But for me, it always makes me feel comfortable when I'm listening to it, which I think is amazing. Like when you're not in front of somebody and you're just listening to somebody, you don't have that physical contact. But no, that's amazing, Avi. So now that you're in Australia, what's been your experience like so far with the Australian business community, or the Australian BNI business community? I mean, I should say.
So to actually take you back, my first trip to Australia was in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I was visiting my brother-in-law and sister-in-law in Melbourne, and one of the things I always do when I travel different countries is to go to a BNI meeting.
Yeah.
All right. So I landed up here. I booked in. I spoke to the director, and she was also a member of the chapter. And she's like, "Hey, it would be great to talk about your BNI journey." And I said, "Sure." And I went for my first chapter meeting in Australia in Melbourne in 2012. I think what we've really got here, Saul, is a correct balance between business and lifestyle, and that's what really amazes me. Is that Monday to Friday, we give ourselves totally to work with the passion, but Saturday, Sunday is family time. It's more me time, and that really attracts me, and I can see that's across different regions, be it WA, be it South Australia, be it Queensland, be it Victoria, or be it New South Wales. I find that as a commonality between all BNI members.
That's interesting.
And that's really awesome. And the Givers Gain value is so evident all across the region. And I'm really, I find myself so fortunate to travel different regions. And I see that members in BNI across the regions share this Givers Gain mentality and the core value with so much of authenticity, and they're really out there to make a difference to people's lives. So I really, that value really resonates highly with me, and that's why I think you can walk into any BNI chapter in Australia. You'll always feel warm. You'll always know that you're taken care as a family member, and you'll know that they're out to help you.
Yeah, I guess that's 100% true. I mean, it's an interesting point, because I guess when you're in the thick of running a business and having a life and having a family, like, you don't necessarily think of it in that sort of way. But I think that's probably true. Like in the were you talking more specifically about, say, then that not being exactly quite the same way overseas in some other locations? Is it more like a specifically Australian sort of thing that we seem to do more here?
I think we've got the lifestyle balance, which
Mm,
is the right balance in giving time to a business, but also giving time to family, to what we really love to do, to give time for hobbies. I did that very much in India, with my background with adventure sports, and I made sure that I kept my weekends for a hobby. So it could be trekking, rock climbing, paragliding, motorcycling, running, cycling, and that's really, uh, attracted me to the lifestyle here is because that's what I really practice in my life,
yeah.
and I found a common ground between me and, what happens in Australia, and more so with BNI members, because there's such an openness to learn. There's such an openness to get to know each other, and I really see members strive really hard to to ensure that they help grow each other's business.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's exactly what you were saying is certainly something that resonates with me very strongly too, and was probably the very first thing, the very first impression that I had when I walked into a BNI chapter years ago too, when at Wellington Point. That was my very first chapter, and when I went into there, because my wife and I have been doing martial arts for many years, and one of the very first things about being with having a little bit of trepidation about what it would all mean, like, I don't know, is it going to be like multi-tiered selling? Is it going to be like a cult? Who knows? I didn't know. No idea. But I was I thought, well, I'll give it a go, and went along. And the very first impression I had was how sort of similar in certain core ways it was to my existing experience doing martial arts, primarily about, because as you go up sort of through the ranks, one of the primary things is helping other people, is like helping, ranks below you to learn. And so, but then as a result of doing that, you become a lot better being a teacher. And so that straight away was like, oh, it's really similar. And I automatically felt at home, and automatically, just the added bonus of having, I think I had a referral on my first day. I mean, I hit it off with the electrician that was there, and he needed a new website, and he was like, great guy, got along. Everyone was incredibly friendly. Thought, well, this looks pretty good. This is a great, sort of great team environment where people are just helping each other, basically.
Yep. So that's what really attracted you to BNI. And like we say, each chapter has its own culture, and each chapter is so different. In spite of being similar, they're different. And that's what I say. Yeah, that you find your fit, or you find the culture which most resonates with you, and that's where Givers Gain comes in, because that's the common thread which binds us together as members, as chapter members. And that's really what calls us, because when we say, hey, I'm going to help you grow your business, when you come in as a visitor, it looks untrue, but
Yep.
but BNI, you usually come into a BNI meeting because a member has invited you, right? And then you go back to him and says, really? And he said, yeah, that's what we do. We help people grow their business, and that's what attracts members to BNI. We've been in, now this year we're 35 years in the business, with more than 270,000 members across 70 countries. And we're slowly getting down to the 10,000 chapter mark.
That's a real milestone, isn't it? That's amazing.
Absolutely. And starting with different chapters, starting online chapters, really going across different categories and really helping each other. And each time I meet a different category, I'm intrigued that how can we give someone with that business in that category business? But somehow, it happens, right? Like members really look out for each other. Members really help each other and try to find out through their one-to-ones, how can they help? And that's the best part about BNI is really members helping each other grow each other's business. And that's at the core value of what we are.
Yeah, I think also maybe for people, people who are already either in BNI or generally know what we're talking about when we talk about givers gain, like that's a core thing. But would you just mind, I guess, explaining in a little bit more detail for people who are listening to the term givers gain, and they may not, because I don't want to assume that everyone knows that, because it might sound kind of obvious, but for people who don't, what does that actually mean in the context of when there's a group of people in a room and what we're talking about? What does that actually mean?
So the first time I came to a BNI meeting, what really caught my attention is when the president explained givers gain. And she said is that if I help you grow your business, you would want to help me grow my business. And then she also said, what goes around comes around.
Same deal. Yeah.
Right. And then I'm like, okay, what does this all really mean? And as I got through my journey, what I found that you get like-minded people who really want to contribute to others to grow their business. And when I'm contributing to grow your business, you start looking out for me. And then you try to find out who would really like to do business with me and who would be a good referral for me. So you start qualifying referrals, looking into your contact sphere or people who you know who would need my business. So it's really givers gain, because as I start giving you business, you start looking at, okay, how is it that you can help me grow my business? And then you really go out of your way to introduce me to friends and family, because I've already established my credibility with you. And like we say in BNI, we do one-to-one, and we start with interests, because in my experience, common interests always bind people together.
Very true. Yeah.
So when I talk about my experience with reading, my experience with adventure sports, or it could be watching movies, there's something which happens with the person or a member and say, oh, we have this in common. And it could be as common as I hate cabbage.
Totally true. I mean, a great example like that. I always feel like sport is a great unifier. Like I'm a big squash player. I'm a crazy squash nerd, and one of our members, especially, like in a funny flip around world of being introduced and having common things in sport, leading you, say, into BNI and other things. In some way, that happened in the reverse for me, because I hadn't played squash for a very long time, and squash was like my main thing for a long time. I gave it up to do taekwondo because I had like a competing interest. I didn't have enough time. A few years ago, one of the other members in our chapter, where he's a mad keen squash player, and he found out I played squash, and then was at me for a long time to come and join the club. I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. And of course, when I went back, it was the best thing I ever did. And so that the relationship then in BNI doing something else, which in turn has been, I think, if I was to quantify it, I could easily say that it's now being back into it again, has made me, I mean, I was already a pretty happy person, but even more happy because I've reignited like a love for something again. But that was then interestingly via BNI.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And these common interests, bind us in a very different way because we find common ground with our fellow members. And, I've seen some groups in Melbourne take on sailing, some people take on cycling, running, so many other things which sometimes you sort of, have put a stop to because business takes over. But when you find one or two people with the same common interest, you say, hey, we're now a group. Let's do this. So I think,
Totally.
yeah. Absolutely. So, it could be any sport. It could be surfing. It could be fishing. It could be, any kind of sport because that's what binds us as members,
And it's our own network too, isn't it? Yeah, it's its own network. And then interestingly, with that story I was just relaying before, then as a result of that, I suppose it's probably a fourth tier referral, but as a result of doing that and getting back into that, I became a part of another squash kind of organization and extending my network and friendships and things then through that as well now. Yeah. And so, those things that they kind of, lead to other things, but even if they don't, it's an extension of your network.
Absolutely.
And, it's kind of, I guess, where friendship and business meet too, which I've always found.
Yeah.
I mean, despite, I suppose, the primary reason why most people join BNI is to get more business.
Right.
But all the amazing extra benefits of, making amazing lifelong friends and like even just on, and I guess learning so much from so many different sorts of people, which I've often reflected on that. And I thought that I can't really think of any other environment where you meet so many different sorts of people who are so kind of often different to you, but everybody has so much in common. It's like a really weird mix of meeting a lot of different people, but generally everybody there has like some really core things in common, apart from the fact that you're all generally running your own business. And so that in itself is, you have a lot in common there with all the different struggles that you go through. And but yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and this is where you really can look out for people. We have members who've been in business for 35 years, and we sometimes have members who've been in business for 2 to 3 years, and the long-standing members then suddenly have the mentoring attitude to the newbies, and the new guys really, because going back when I started my business, I was lucky to join BNI at that time and get these different mentors from different businesses because they came with that rich experience. It could be, an interior designer, it could be an architect, it could be people from financial services, people from real estate, people from IT, people with accounting backgrounds. It's a huge different category, but with the same core value.
Very much, yeah, very similar.
Yep. And that's what I think binds the chapter together is that they may be from different backgrounds, different education, different years of experience, but they find a common ground among themselves. And they just stay back. They find a lot of value, and they stay back as members and add value to themselves. Some of them get onto the leadership team. Some of them become mentors in chapters. And as you know, BNI also has lifelong learning, and it's consistently learning for us. We're blessed to get all this education from different members from across the world. And that's how it is in BNI.
Yeah. I guess the other word that is common here too, that has that same sort of meaning as givers gain, is the idea of reciprocity. And I was just going to just to get your thoughts on this idea that I had actually just before the podcast, and I was thinking about givers gain, and it is being a part of what I've been doing and everyone in BNI for a long time. And I thought, is reciprocity, like as an idea, is it almost like a building block of just doing business in general, not just that, it's obviously not just the initial connection because you're building trust, over time, that it kind of all, if you were going to distill it down maybe to, like, if someone said you have to distill this idea down to, one thing, if it had to be like one thing, I would sort of say that would be trust, almost in, because without that, like, you kind of, it's probably too far to say without that you don't have anything, but it's kind of true, I think. Like, you've got to have that at some level for many, I think, like many things probably in life anyway, like that's, you don't have to have it to do things, but it's certainly, if you want to do things really, well, and have long, long-term relationships. This is like with, friends and family too, obviously, like with anyone, it's all about that, really.
Correct. Well, when a visitor really first walks in and sees what's really happening, sometimes they go back to the sponsor and say, hey, is this really true? Like, are you really giving business to each other to grow each other's business? And that's what really happens, right? And it's a slow, it's a long term, it's not a small plan. BNI needs to be as a long-term strategy for your business.
Yeah, you got to play the long game, right?
You got to play there. You got to be there. You got to be building relationships. You got to build your credibility, and then slowly people start to see how can they contribute to you, and that's what I find. Like, that's why one of the reasons members stay back is that they form the relationship in the chapter. They form the rapport, and we've seen that even when members move cities or members travel interstate, the first thing they do is find a BNI chapter. And a lot of times, even I get some requests from people saying, hey, I've got somebody moving to Queensland, and do you know a good chapter in Brisbane? And I'm like, you know what? All my chapters are good, but let me catch up with this person and figure out which is the closest chapter to him. Yep. And then I can give you, I can write an email to the president, and then the president invites that person. They go for a chapter meeting and then find it. It happened last week. I had an ED from Melbourne write me an email copying another person who's in Brisbane, and he came. And he said, which chapter would you advise? And I said, if you're looking at CBD, these are a couple of chapters which are based in the CBD. I'm copying you into an email. Now, this was Friday, 2 weeks earlier. Last week, this person went for a chapter visit on Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. And at 9:30, he'd already joined the chapter.
Is that right? Wow.
It just resonated with him. He found the kind of people he wanted to work for. His business is very specific and very niche in what he does. So, consulting of a very different kind. And he just found the right kind of people for him to now network and grow his business.
I think one of those things too, which is me just reflecting back to when I first joined a BNI chapter, is that idea that, business is often very isolating. Like, even if you're dealing with a lot of clients all the time, and you don't, like, for many people it can still be very isolating in the sense that unless you've got like a business advisor or like a mentor, or that for many people it's quite insular. They're just thinking themselves. They don't feel necessarily like they've got a lot of help. And when my wife and I that run our business, we still kind of credit and sync our proper start, what we consider to be our proper start to our business, was sort of heralded by our start in BNI. That's only sort of in retrospect. At the time, we were like, oh, we've been, in business for X amount of years, and we feel like we're pretty good at things. And, now in retrospect, we're like, wow, we had a lot to learn, to learn at that point in time. And of course, that's still happening. Like, I still feel like, we're like this much more experienced, but, that assumption that you're kind of, at the top of something is always something I really liked from, there was I think it was something in our Taekwondo club, this idea that was sort of shared about as you go up through the ranks and when you become more experienced, eventually, you return to being a white belt. In the sense, there's this sort of wonderful metaphor, which of course always doesn't quite happen like this, but I actually saw it physically one time with our grandmaster, who's like he's literally, if anyone who could say he's at the top of his game, he's like a ninth dan in Taekwondo and Hapkido. And so he's like the world expert in like many things, and many people would consider that to be the case. But apart from being the most, humble, wonderful sort of man, the idea that your belt starts white, which symbolizes, as it's filled up with color, it's like a symbol of you're being filled up with knowledge and learning and wisdom and various things. But then eventually you reach a state where you kind of return to being a white belt, and because your black belt starts to fade, it eventually loses all its color and it becomes not quite white. But actually one time, like, I saw his original belt that he had, which he doesn't usually have on because it's like really old, and it was like a really light gray. And I thought, wow, that is, that was obviously doesn't happen all the time, that idea. But I found that idea that always sort of stuck with me then in BNI, is that there's like so much to gain constantly from all these different people who have such different sort of experiences. It's kind of like going into like a candy shop. It's amazing. Like it's like all the time. There's all this stuff that you just wouldn't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
Really unique.
Yeah. What you said is so correct, Saul, because in BNI, as we say, and you see, one of the core values is lifelong learning. And each week, even as a BNI member or as a director, there's something or the other I'm learning on BNI University, or listening to a podcast, or a town hall, or something which gives me, which makes it clear for me that we as human beings can never stop learning. And there's so much to learn from everyone. As you know, now we've got Business Booster series. So, people from all walks of life, people who are very successful, public speakers, motivational speakers, we can listen to their podcasts, and you never stop learning. And as you rightly said, with a sport like that, you just got to be open and take all the learning you can get, because it's never going to stop.
And there's that, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. There's that, and that kind of, for me, like from that martial art perspective that I sort of carried over and saw very evidently in BNI is that idea of kind of the more you're giving, the less sway your ego has kind of over you, into talk about, to think on the talk to talk about, but probably think about like me, because ultimately, yeah, I mean, we're all in it, to get more business, but for it can be a bit of a hard idea sometimes to get your head around, because we're used to asking for something and then you get it, and then but not necessarily in that sort of equation is the idea that in order to get it you have to give something. It's often just like you either pay for it or you just get it, but it's kind of so much more powerful once you experience it. But then the trick is you obviously have to experience it. You can't be told that, like, you have to experience it.
Yeah.
It's like somebody going, it's like, that's actually one of the things I love about sport in general is that you have to perform. Like when you're there and you're competing, no matter how good you've been in practice or how good you were like last week, you've got to be good there, there on the spot. And I always find that really exciting. I always, it gives me a real buzz that you have to perform well, because in my mind it kind of means you have to be mindful of things then consistently, because otherwise, like, you could just rewind to like the time 3 months ago where you did really well and just replay that instead of you're having to do it again on the spot.
Yep. I think it's consistent, and it's constant, and we got to be practicing that all the time. And that's the real juice of BNI, I guess, members really helping other members to gain business. And when you do that, members take notice of you and say, okay, let's help this guy to grow his business. And like sports, you got to keep practicing, because you cannot ever stop giving. And as you start giving, members take notice of you and then help you grow your business.
It's an interesting thing. You just saying that then too. It ties a little bit into what you were saying, like at the start of the podcast, about, lifestyle, having a good balance with lifestyle and business. Is I feel like there's a really strong, this is probably from personal experience to me talking about squash, like you feel when you're doing things that, with your family or other activities, whether it's sport or what have you, you're giving to yourself, but like a very important part of, once again, you only realize when you're actually doing it and the feeling you get from it, that the giving, you almost really have to be able to give to yourself enough that you're able to give to other people. I'm sure there's like another way to say that too. I just can't think of like the quote, but it's that idea that you have to be able to be, full like a cup in order to be able to give out. Like you can't, actually that's probably a pretty good metaphor. Like if you have a glass of water and that's you and you're filled up, you can't really give some of that to others because, it's not full. It might be like, half empty. And I think that's really true. Like, I think that's a really, true thing probably in life. And certainly is in BNI, because people can tell, if you're not into it, they just can. They're just, you don't have to be a super intuitive person to tell when somebody's genuine about something or not.
Yeah, when you stop contributing as a member, like you said, people can see that, and what I find is that with so many members who have met, what is common with them is the habit of giving. And it's like a habit now, they keep on looking out for how can they help their fellow members, and how can they, refer to each other. And it's so strange that they do that day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year, such that people's strategy for business now is BNI. It's an intrinsic part of their life now, and it's not outside. It's a part of them, because going to a chapter meeting every week gets you a kind of bonding with fellow members, and that's why we said building relationships. And you get to know members not only from the business they do, but also who that person is personally. Like most, if that's how we start our one-to-ones, or that's how we start a lot of our presentations, by knowing a little bit about our family, a little bit about our background. And that's where I think people are really attracted to is, okay, here is a fellow member who has a similar life journey like mine. And that's what sort of gets us together, is because we all have the same, I would say, concerns, issues, and really, when we get together, the richness of what we've gone through contributes to the other member, and like you said, if I'm a more senior member in BNI, there are a lot of stuff I know which I can help a newer member to do. That's why there's a mentoring program, and that sort of helps people in their journey in BNI, because they find like-minded individuals really helping them to grow their business.
I think actually one of the most intriguing things that occasionally, when you get into sort of a routine in BNI and you don't take notice of things, and then something happens and like you get snapped back into like, oh yes, it works that way. Like you fall into like a bit of a routine. One of the things that I always find occasionally happens, and it reminds me of how sort of weird and interesting this is the amount of times I felt like, I've like known somebody, say, for 5 or 6 years or even more, and like you just assume and you go, I probably know that person pretty well. Like I would assume that I've had enough one-to-ones with them, or like had enough, personal chats with them to feel like I know everything about them. And then something happens, you just have another one-to-one and you're talking about, or you even say something in your presentation and someone says something to you and you go, I never knew that about you. And it still kind of blows my mind that there's still always extra stuff that you stumble across.
Absolutely.
And that people then, I'm just trying to think of a specific example, but or also then sometimes the converse, where you've been saying something about your business for however long, like for years, like for 10 years, and then somebody who you've known for an equal amount of time says to you, like one day, which happened to me a couple of years ago, they said, I didn't know you did that. And I go, come on, give me a break. Like, like surely you would, but then I thought, well, that either means one of two things. It either means they haven't been listening the whole time, or it means that maybe I didn't explain it well enough. Like maybe it means that, not to be so self-centered to think that, like, I mean, it might be a combination of both, who knows? But the fact is that those things, and that like that consistent weekly interaction is that, that idea of consistency, like being in the branding and design sort of industry where we are with our business. I kind of like always see this really specific alignment too between branding, what I'm always talking to people about like branding, I'm going, consistency equals trust as this thing. I was going, well, it's pretty much the same in BNI. It's like the same, consistency with branding across all your collateral and your messaging. I was going like, well, it's pretty much the same thing in BNI. Like, it's just no different. And I've always seen that alignment as really sort of intriguing too, that it's the same thing. Like that is then really important with word of mouth marketing, which, as a thing, like it relies on, of course, trust, and it relies on all this thing, all the aspects we've talked about. But here's the funny thing that I've only sort of been thinking about more in recent years, is that because we talk to people about like search engines and what Google does and all that sort of stuff, the irony about, this is my own personal theory, so anyone listening who's got another opinion, feel free to let me know. So, but I always feel like every other form of marketing is almost like a simulation of the core idea of like word of mouth marketing. The reason why I say that is because that's essentially what search engine algorithms try to do. They try to simulate, they try to match people, but what they're actually trying to do is they're trying to simulate trust, and they're trying to, build digital trust through a range of sophisticated ways, but they're basically still trying to simulate like the core, age-old version of, people just talking to each other and building trust over time. It's still the same idea.
Well, as you and me are evolving as human beings, and our understanding of everything develops in a different way, that's also what happens with the member, right? And he's evolving, and I guess sometimes the way they listen also changes or transforms.
True. Yeah.
And we could be saying the same thing, but the meaning or the grasp of what we said might be occurring to them in a different way that time.
Yeah, by how you said it, or the intonation in your voice,
Correct.
or how much they like you.
Yeah.
Or they. Yeah, totally.
And sometimes it and like you said, you might be saying the same thing again and again, but at a different time, the member might get it in a very different way. It's like watching a movie for the fifth time.
Yeah.
And like, hey, I missed this. Now, did you miss it? No, of course not. You've seen the movie. You've seen the movie right from the start to the end. But the way you got it at that time is the richness of your getting that.
Mm.
And that's what typically happens when members, talk about their business. And that's what I would say, it was like a eureka moment when you say, oh, I never knew you did this. So of course I've spoken to you about this a long time.
Yeah.
But, they get it at that time. And that's when that magic happens,
Frustrating.
Like,
yeah. There's this initial frustration from me, like, come on, give me a break. Like, are you joking? No, not joking. But then it then made me, then I can only assume that like some of that, like generally when people do or don't hear things or do has probably to do with focus. Like they how well they're focusing, what they're choosing to focus on, how you're saying it makes people focus in a different way. And, then therefore, it's kind of okay in some respects, like we've been talking about, just to have this evolving journey, because it's a long game. It's going to happen at some point. It's like, you're going to be getting, or hoping to get referrals from people, but like you got to play your part. You got to play your part in that. And helping people out. But it's a really, like, it's such an interesting sort of organization too. And I mean, I'm sure like all the I was going to say millions. Would there be millions of people who are part of BNI worldwide, Avi?
So we're now
hundreds of thousands.
We're now more than 270,000 members worldwide.
Yeah,
but each
it's a lot
week,
of people though.
Each week, each month, we touch the lives of literally millions of people, right? Because when members give referrals to each other, which converts into business, you're actually tapping into millions of people worldwide.
It's kind of the world's best kept secret in a way. Like it's because that's the thing, in a strange way I really like about it, is when I've talked to clients and I've just sort of invited them to a meeting or to other people that I know, and they're like, what's that? I mean, I can't imagine, of course, not knowing that now because I've been doing it for such a long time. And you have that assumption that other people would know that probably. Like, why wouldn't they? Like, it's so huge and it's like so worldwide. But then, like, it's not advertised. It's not, pushed in the same way. It just relies on that core word of mouth marketing. Yep. And that's the power, which in itself, I suppose that is like the most obvious sort of lesson to show to people as to how well it works, is that
yep.
It's only had to do that, and look where it is.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, weekly, millions of lives are touched across the world because of what BNI does. The opportunities BNI can create for members, for businesses worldwide, and that's how it is. That's what our strength is. Is really making a difference in the way the world does business. Like we say, changing the way the world does business.
And I think on that note, that's a great way. That's a fantastic way with the with that particular phrase to wrap up the podcast, Avi. Have you got, just before we finish up, have you got anything else specific that you'd like to share about the topic?
I have Dr. Ivan Meisner's quotes always really, make so much of sense. But one of the things one of the quotes which really resonates with me is what Ivan says is, people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care.
Yeah, totally.
And that's so universal, I just thought I'll share that, which is like one of my favorite
quotes. I like
quotes.
that one. Yeah, I like that one.
And thank you for having me on this podcast. It was really a pleasure chatting with you.
The pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Avi. And before the last little bit, could you tell everyone the best way to learn more about BNI, and then also to get in contact with BNI or with you, or whatever you'd like to share?
Well, absolutely. Just visit a local chapter. Just go to bni.com.au, find a chapter. Someone will once you send an email, someone will get in touch. Visit the local chapter, see the difference members make to each other, and sometimes you could get onto this journey yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So with that, thank you so much again. It's been a real pleasure. It's been a fantastic conversation. So with that in mind, that's actually it for today, guys. Thanks so much for listening into our podcast yet again. Before we go, please leave your feedback as well as any suggestions for topics you would like us to discuss in future episodes. Thanks again for listening to the Grow Your Business podcast, and we'll see you again soon. Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Grow Your Business.